Hello, everybody. Today we are going to do the show in English. This is an additional program of Radio Vera, and sometimes we invite English-speaking guests because remember, our goal with this show is to bring more Western topics to discussion. Hopefully, Russian-speaking people will also understand this program because it's in English, but I advise everyone to actually activate the subtitles function in YouTube so that you can actually see the translations as we speak. Добро пожаловать на дополнительную программу «Радио Вера», где мы обсуждаем западные темы. Сегодня мы будем беседовать на английском языке. Пожалуйста, включите субтитры, чтобы YouTube автоматически переводил то, что мы говорим, автоматически на русский язык. Тогда будет, возможно, легче понять то, о чем мы говорим. И сейчас я перехожу на английский. Today, our guest is Dan Norton. Dan Norton is an objectivist. I have met Dan Norton in 2015 at the Objectivist conference, which took place in Las Vegas. The Objectivist conference happens every year. And Dan Norton has been very active in his advocacy of objectivism in the media and talking to people. Also, Dan Norton holds a Ph.D. in philosophy, so he has real expertise in when it comes to discussion about philosophy. All right, and now I'm going to bring into the studio Dan Norton. Hello, Dan. How are you? I cannot hear you. Cannot hear you. A moment ago it was working, but now I cannot hear you. We're having some technical difficulties. I'm going to wait until Dan Norton gets his sound working, probably because of the headphones. We tested this setup without the headphones. Cannot hear you still. Perhaps, Dan, you can use the same setup that you had before we actually went live. We usually meet 5 minutes before the show to check the settings. I will remove Dan for a moment for 5 minutes and put him back on after I make some introductions of my own. While Dan is setting up his audio equipment, we will put him back in about 1 or 2 minutes. See if he has resolved his issues. But now I would like to just give a few highlights about what I would like to discuss today. I would like to cover with Dan, make an overview over prevalent ideas that take the minds of Americans, of people living in the West. We have now a lot of cataclysms or changes that are going on in the world. There is war between Israel and Lebanon and Gaza. There is war in Syria. There is a discussion of end of war in Ukraine. There is nomination of Trump for the next president. Not nomination, he was chosen, sorry. He is the president-elect. So all these things have influenced the public discourse, and I think Dan is a perfect person to discuss these things. Let's see if Dan has fixed his audio. Hi, Dan.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Great. I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
I can hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. All of a sudden, my AirPods stopped working, and now they're working again. So hopefully, they will continue to work.
Great. Well, it's good that me and you, Dan, don't believe in ghosts. Otherwise, people say it's a ghost.
Then we'll have to pray to God or something.
Or the Descartes demon.
The demons.
So,
Dan, I don't believe in supernatural.
Exactly. Then, what do you think about the state of ideas in the United States and America or the West today in general? Is it improving or is it getting worse?
That's a big question, and I don't think it's obvious on net balance whether things are getting better or worse overall. There's just so many things to consider. It's a huge subject. So I think in some ways, things are getting worse in the world. I mean, we've seen, like, for example, the Putin's invasion of Ukraine, or Hamas's attack on Israel, just slaughtering innocent people. There's all kinds of problems in the world, and yet at the same time, I think there's lots of good things in the world. I mean, right now we're having, despite some technical difficulties, we have this amazing technology that enables you and I, who are, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of miles apart, to have this conversation, which
Yeah,
would have seemed like a total fantasy
yeah.
hundreds or thousands of years ago, yet we were able to do this. So there's all kinds of good things and bad things. And um, I have ideas on how to make the good things continue and improve further and diminish the bad things, which gets into my philosophy of objectivism, which I learned from Ayn Rand.
Let me ask you first. Do
Yeah.
you think this technology that we have now, we have YouTube, we have ability to stream, anyone can express his opinion, has it actually helped? Because we actually now have much more opportunities for people with bad ideas to stream their bad ideas. They are not filtered at all, while before, there were a few media channels, and the people who actually ended up speaking at these media channels, they had to be somewhat reasonable about what they say. Their speeches had to have some kind of logic to them. But now that's not quite the case.
Yeah, anyone can jump on Twitter or social media and express their viewpoint. There's not just like in America, there used to be the three big networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS. And it was very hard for anyone else to break in. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you might think it's bad because any random person can just state their opinion, no matter how crazy it is. On the other hand, people with lots of good opinions who might not otherwise be heard now have an opportunity to do so, and that would include myself. I started a YouTube channel, Dan Norton One, if anyone wants to check it out.
Mhm.
And there are millions of YouTube channels that people can go to get some alternative source of media if you don't like or just want to hear something different than is expressed by these three major broadcasting networks. Or I don't know, in other countries, maybe Russia, at certain times in the Soviet Union, you have to have your opinion sanctioned by the governments. It has to be state approved. Um, and if you're not approved by the state, you could be jailed, or worse. Journalists are sometimes killed in countries, authoritarian regimes. So I think on net, it's good that we have these tools, but each of us as individuals just has to use them wisely and use our own judgment. We can't assume that anything we see or hear on the internet is true. We have to use our own independent judgment, our own faculty of reason, our minds, and think about, does this really make sense? Could this just be some conspiracy that we're hearing?
But that
So there's
actually
no
hasn't been
replacement for
happening.
judgment.
It actually hasn't been happening. We have now opportunity for populists to rise to reach unprecedented reach, to have unprecedented reach. And case in point, you have Tucker Carlson, who is advocating. He had an interview with a Nazi sympathizer. He's advocating that. Last one was, did he say that the nuclear power is a message from the demons? Did you hear of this?
I heard something about that. Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was pretty crazy.
Yeah, and still, this man is seen by a large public as a great interviewer. He is getting these not just by the public, by the people themselves who agree to give him interviews. These are people with big names. These are presidents of countries, and that's a little discouraging to me. And of course, we have Donald Trump, who claimed that he has won the election in 2020 he did this using mass media. Um, and a lot of people actually are convinced that he indeed won the election. I'm not sure if he could have done the same had this been on the public media. Could he actually go on C-SPAN or some other public media program and make these wild claims? Would he actually rile up so many people? Because, how many Americans, maybe at least a third of the population, was convinced that he won the election just from his claims? He actually did not produce any conclusive evidence, and many court cases, actually most court cases he failed 60 out of 61 court cases. So not sure exactly if in practice we're seeing that Twitter is a force for good, or X now that it's called, or YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know if like the truth will ultimately prevail. I mean, I think it will, but what the time frame on that is it's very hard to say. Maybe in the short run there's some it seems like a net loss to have these alternative sources of media, but in the very long run they will win out. Sometimes it takes years or decades for the truth to prevail. There could be a dark ages, right, which lasted for centuries historically, but
Yeah.
eventually there was a renaissance and then a rise in the West.
Mhm.
So I think there are some very troubling signs right now with the rise of Trump, who I'm strongly opposed to. I mean, I think the best example of being that he tried to steal an election, at least on my reading of things. I don't follow super closely, but I think it's a widespread view that he did try to steal an election. Also, unfortunately, I would say widespread that he did not. You have lots of his defenders. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know how this is going to shake out in the next few years during his next term. But I think in the very very long run, it's better that we have these technologies than that we don't.
All right. Well, jump from here to your personal experience, that you actually targeted some of these big YouTube shows, like Sam Cedar show. And how many subscribers does it have? 2 million? Around 2 million?
I last I checked, the name of the show is The Majority Report with Sam
Yeah.
Cedar. This is a leftist kind of news and politics show. And the last I checked, they had like 1.6 million subscribers, something like this.
That's still
And
a
I've
very
called
large.
into this show several times, and I like to engage in debates and discussions with people who have alternative views. So this is a way which I'm using these technologies to break into spaces that have ideas very opposed to my own, of
Yeah.
my ideas of reasonism. And when I've gone on these shows, I've gotten a significant uptick in subscribers. So a lot of people, probably the vast majority are or at least a large majority, are very opposed to what I'm saying, and they wouldn't. There's not really a chance of changing their minds, but there might be. When you have over 1 million people, that's a lot of people, and so there might be a small minority or fringe
Yeah.
among them who actually are open to different ideas. And I've gotten upticks in subscribers when I've gone on those shows. So maybe some of his
Which
audience
means
has
which
come over to
means
my
that
channel.
the audience, sorry to interrupt you, which means that the audience of these shows, which are the leftist audience who heard you and you would not expect them to agree with you, actually found it interesting enough and challenging enough to go and subscribe to your channel.
Yeah, and some of them might just appreciate a civilized, polite discussion. I try to do that. I'm often treated, I would say, not with the best respect when I go on these shows. They will try to mock or ridicule guests
Yeah.
sometimes. But I think when they
Mhm.
do that, it reflects badly on themselves. And if you go to the comment sections of some of these
Yeah.
channels, they'll say like, "I generally agree with you, but you didn't treat this guy well. That you make yourself look kind of like a jerk." And some
Mhm.
people might appreciate the kind of civilized approach I try to take, and some people have said that in
Yeah.
comments when they subscribe to my videos.
You generated results of your phone calls generated thousands of comments. Is that true?
Yeah, and some of the videos, my largest appearance on his show, last I checked, I think it had over a 250,000 views, and maybe somewhere around 2,000, excuse me, 2,000 comments. So yeah, it does get a lot of attention and gets a lot of discussion going. I mean, a lot of the discussion I think is just silly, and the comments aren't worth very much. But there is
Yeah.
substantive discussion mixed in with all the silliness.
Would you advocate your approach to other people who are thinking to get into streaming or public media? They have some ideas. Maybe these are objectivists. Maybe these are just people who disagree with what is being said, and they just want to try to challenge the points of view. Would you recommend them to do this? Or is it very discouraging and depressing afterwards that they made fun of you and you have to kind of cool off for a few weeks?
It
Would you
doesn't really
recommend your
bother me much, personally, but everyone is different. People have different personalities, and they
Yeah,
have different goals. For me, I'm most concerned with just getting the truth out there, and so I'm
yeah,
willing to undergo some ridicule. I think it's BS. So it's like if someone says something about you that is just
yeah,
obviously not true, you can just disregard it, and
yeah,
it might make that the person who's doing the name calling or the insulting, it makes them look bad, although they think they're
yeah,
making you look bad. Um, so I put the priority on just getting the truth out there, and then people whose opinions matter, I think they will. What I say will more likely resonate with them. That's who I'm trying to reach. I'm not trying to change the mind of the hosts or a
yeah,
lot of the people who listen to the show. It's the minority
yeah.
of people who are listening who might be open to new ideas. But
Well,
that
to everyone
said,
who is, sorry to
sorry, go
interrupt, to
ahead.
everyone who is listening to us, if you go to Dan Norton's YouTube channel, he has a copy of each of the excerpts from the big shows he called. It's true that most of these experts actually posted on their own shows, on their own YouTube channels, but it's harder to find. If you want to actually find it all in one place, you can go to Dan Norton's YouTube channel. You will find a lot of these excerpts, most of which are about the Some Cedar Majority Report show, where Dan is calling in and challenges the host, challenging the audience. And it's not just one guy. It's not just some cedar. There are about 3 or 4 people there in the studio, and they're all making fun of Dan's phone call. They try to
Uh
ridicule
oh.
him, but Dan is steadfast and he is calm about it, and he just answers the questions one after another, resulting in overall these channels thinking, well, gee, that was a interesting phone call. Why don't we cut it out into a separate video and post it separately on our channel? Which is very encouraging, because if they didn't think much of your phone calls, they would just not do that, right? But they did find it necessary to cut it out and repost it as a separate short. All right. But related to this, do you think there is a rudeness culture in, on Twitter, on YouTube, in the comment section, that people will actually, uh, or below some articles on, say, on Forbes, that people will be more rude in the comment section than they are in real life? Like, if you meet this person in real life who doesn't agree with you, he's not going to say to you what he allows to say in these comments.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there is certainly a lot of rudeness there, and I think the maybe part of what fuels it is the fact that you can just have a screen name which doesn't identify who you are. These are just anonymous people,
Yeah.
and so their reputation is not tied to what they say. So they can just spew all kinds of venomous nonsense, and it's not going to harm them in real life because no one knows who this person is.
Yeah.
Um, so this is again kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, people might hold themselves to a higher standard if their name is attached to what they say. On the other hand, you might be penalized in real life for saying something good, or at least something you might think is good.
Yeah.
Like if you want to criticize Putin or something, if you live in an authoritarian regime, you want to be free to voice your view, but you don't want to be thrown in jail for it. So I do see there's an upside as well to having the ability to post on an anonymous account. So
The early
with all
internet,
these things, there's always often
the early internet
cost
actually
and benefit.
had pretty much everybody with these anonymized nicknames in the early internet. But maybe with the appearance of Facebook, that's when there was a push for people actually using real names, and then what the people say online, is more or less public about them. So it's a challenge. I think maybe people like you and me who decided to go public with opinions, that we have to use our real name.
Well, a lot of people they kind of do a hybrid. Like they don't say their real name. They'll make up a name, but you can see their face. So there are degrees here. Some people will not show their name or their face. Some people will show their face but make up some alias for their online persona. So there are different ways you could do it. Um, and it's just very personal depending on what your situation is like there are certain times in my life when I would not have wanted to be public, like when I was going through graduate school. I think a lot of my ideas would have been controversial, and maybe I wouldn't have been treated fairly there. Maybe professors would have been biased against me if I expressed certain ideas. So I didn't really become public until after graduate school, and I think that just might make sense in it. If you're working in a certain industry, maybe you're not going to be hired or not going to be promoted
Mhm.
if people know that you hold certain ideas. So I think it's just a very personal decision as to whether it makes sense in your context to be public or not,
Yeah.
and you can use or abuse that. So I think individuals just have to decide for themselves what's best for themselves, and then given what you're going to do, even if you're going to be anonymous, I don't think that means you should start acting irrationally or defaming people. You should still behave well, but if you don't, there are mechanisms you can use to fight against that, like blocking. I'm very liberal when it comes to blocking. So whether someone is anonymous or not anonymous, if someone engages in a conversation with me in a way that's uncivil, they're just throwing ad hominems, insults, they're not having a
Yeah.
substantive discussion, I will block that person so I don't have to deal with that any further.
Would you say that this liberal practice of blocking decreased your viewer count or subscriber count on your platforms?
It might to some degree, but it might also increase it. It's hard to know exactly what the net result is. So by blocking a lot of people, I'm losing those viewers. However, I'm having what I would consider a more high quality comment section. Like people who go to my comment sections, which are
Yeah.
moderated on my channel, they don't have to wade through a lot of BS and nonsense comments. They can read substantive comments, things that are actually dealing with the essence of the issues, and that's the kind of discussions that I want to encourage. So I don't know what on net is the result in terms of viewer count, but I think it fosters a healthier
Let
discussion.
me ask you, maybe you can give us a brief overview. You started from having no public presence. You're starting basically from level zero, and you try to attract people to your ideas. And you did this by approaching people in universities. Was that how you started?
Yes, when I first started my YouTube channel, this was about 5 years
Yeah.
ago in 2019. I was just finishing up my Ph.D. at the University of California, Davis. I was working on a philosophy Ph.D. Um, and as I was finishing up my degree
Yeah.
there, I had some free time, and I didn't have a traditional job lined up. A lot of people who are in graduate school for philosophy, they intend to go on and become professors, and that was my intention for a while. But eventually, I decided I wanted to do something different. I wanted to engage with the broader
Yeah.
public, reach a larger audience, and it just seemed a more fulfilling sort of career to me after I got the idea of it. And YouTube wasn't around when I first. Well, it was around when I started graduate school, but I didn't really have the idea of becoming a YouTuber myself. But after I got this idea partway through grad school, I thought I would at least want to give it a try. It seems like it could be a lot of fun. I can have total control over what I discuss things that I'm passionate about, and I just wanted to give it a shot. So to get some content for my channel, I decided I would go around and interview people near the university where I was doing my graduate work. So I interviewed a lot of students, mostly on the topic of selfishness. Ayn Rand, she's very well known for her promotion of what she calls the virtue of selfishness. So this is a term which is often, she would say, misunderstood. People think if someone is selfish, that means you're a bad person, you're a rude jerk to others, you don't care about others at all. Um, that's not Ayn Rand's view of selfishness at all. Uh, for her, it just means doing what's best for yourself. But that does not mean treating others like rude jerks. Because, like, for instance, if I treat you very badly, if I'm unfair to you, then you're not going to want to be my friend. You're not going to want to do business with
Yeah.
me. So is it really in my interest to treat you like a rude jerk? Ayn Rand would say no. You should consider other people's perspectives and respect their rights, but it's all for the point of making your own life go better, pursuing your own happiness. That's what it's all about.
But let me interrupt
And
here. For many men,
yeah,
for
sure.
many men at least, it's standard conceptual idea that a man has to be tough, strong, macho, and the way it comes out in social environment has to be dominant and dominating. And I saw some videos where Donald Trump is shaking somebody's hand, and he is like pulling his hand to himself, the guy's hand, to show that he is bigger and stronger and more dominating. At least that's how I interpret it. And so for many people, from at least men, when they are being rude to people, it's not to treat these people badly for no reason at all, but it's to assert dominance. Is that a bad idea from a point of view of objectivism? Should basically men act like pacifists, or like very friendly terms? Because I don't know if you know, but usually men become friends after they have a fight and they beat each other up, because then they showed that none of them afraid of the other, and they are equal. They're equal physically, at least, and they are equal in reserve. They're actually willing to go and punch each other's faces, and they will not back down. You can see it in many movies that, let's say a man takes someone else's man's woman. Maybe the woman wanted it, but then when these two men meet, they do have to have a fight. And we saw this in this Sex in the City TV series. I don't know if you've seen that, but there are two strong men, the Mr. Big and the guy who is making chairs. And in the end, they did have a fight over the woman. But the woman did make her choices already. The woman didn't need that fight, but it was important for the TV people to put this in the script that these two men had to fight it out. And only after that, they became friends. So when you're saying what you're saying, my question is, well, how do you actually interpret it in real life?
Well, there's a lot that goes into how is it best to interact with others. I certainly wouldn't say be a pacifist. I think it's important to stand up for yourself, to engage in self-defense, either intellectually or physically, if you're physically attacked. So part of my view is that, which I got from Ayn Rand, is that you don't initiate force against other people. You don't coerce them. However, you can use retaliatory force. So if someone initiates force against you, then you can fight back. If it's an emergency, you can do it yourself. Otherwise, you can call the police if there's time to wait. But you don't just sit there as a pacifist and let someone pummel you. Now, if you accept many of the dominant ideas of morality that many people hold, at least pay lip service to, like altruism or Christianity, many people get their ethics from religion and Christianity in the West, especially. So in this worldview, you should turn the other cheek. be like Jesus. And he said, love your enemies, even not just your neighbors. Now, I don't think that's very conducive to your own self-interest. If you're going to love your enemies, I think that gives them a license to take advantage of you, exploit you. And I think that this actually manifests in the way that in world affairs, like for instance, if Israel is attacked, they don't mount a full-throated counterattack. They'll push back against Hamas for a while, but then they might agree to a ceasefire. We don't want to be too strong and domineering, because we're the stronger military, and the world often has a sympathy for the weaker party. You might see this as an altruistic kind of view. So, as a proponent of a morality of self-interest, I think it's important to stand up for yourself, not be a pacifist, but also not be initiating aggression if someone hasn't aggressed against you. Instead, it's better to act as a traitor and have win-win kind of interactions. So we might be, allies with some other country which is also engaged in peaceful trade.
But before we jump into politics, I do want to tie a knot on that point. Is that you would say that this behavior that Trump does with pulling when he's shaking hand is not good. That it's much better to have like a normal handshake with respect to another man. Would you say that?
I haven't thought much about the philosophy of handshakes, but it's. I saw one recently where he was kind of contorted. His arm is going down, and it looked very, very strange. And I don't know if phony is a good way.
But it represents his
But
general approach to the way he deals with people and what he thinks of people. He respects authoritarian leaders. He respects at least dictators. That's what he says. When Kamala Harris made fun of him, saying that every person who worked under you, including generals, said that you're a disgrace, he said, well, Viktor Orban doesn't think I'm a disgrace. He's a high opinion of me, something like that. That was during the debate. And we know that he said I respect Putin, something like that, in his previous presidency. And the general, when he was arguing that he won the election, the previous election, not this election, the previous 2020 election, he was dominating or manipulating, maybe scaring people who are under his not direct command, but people in the Republican Party, that they have to support him, saying that he did win the election, saying, well, if you don't give me 11,000 votes, he said to one of the people, I can forget the name, it's hard to remember the name, but he said, if you don't give me, I think it was governor of some state, if you don't give me 11,000 votes, I'm going to, it might be criminally liable. And then also, in the same vein, his son went on TV, on I think Fox News, and said that, well, if you don't support Trump in this claim, then your political career is over. That's his son, but still, it's the ideas that emanate from Trump. So, would you say that this is not the right behavior, not the manly behavior?
I would say it's not the right behavior whether you're a man or a woman. It's just as a human being, I think it's good to be in touch with reality and not make up facts, not lie, not be dishonest. Unfortunately, I think Trump and many of his followers are not honestly facing the facts. I think there's a lot of delusion, particularly surrounding the 2020 election. I think it might have been Georgia, the state where he asked to find me these however many thousand votes was needed. And then I heard that he made this slate of fake electors to get certified in order to pretend that he really had the legitimacy, which he didn't have. So I don't think it's so much an issue of manliness or womanliness. It's just humanness. It's best to face the facts, not put your feelings or desires over your perception of what's actually true. There's Ben Shapiro is well known for a line, facts don't care about your feelings. And I think that's definitely true. I mean, the facts are what they are, whether you like them or not. But unfortunately, I think many people don't abide by that statement, including Ben Shapiro
Yeah.
himself, who has over time become more friendly to Trump, and he's also religious. I don't think being religious is a great sign that you're not putting your feelings over the facts, because religion is based on faith, which is, as I understand it, faith is you believe something even though you don't have evidence for it, and that's definitely not a fact-based
Yeah.
approach. Yet Ben Shapiro and billions of people around the world have this kind of mystical, faith-based approach, not a reality-based approach. I would say follow your reason, your rational mind's judgment of the facts. That's the way to go, whether you're a man, woman, child, or anything.
All right. Since we now did mention Ben Shapiro, I wanted to give a brief discussion about the intellectuals who seem to capture the minds of Americans. These are YouTubers. This is Sam Cedar, who runs a show with, as you said, 1.6 million subscribers. This is Bill Maher. This is Jordan Peterson. This is Ben Shapiro. This is, what is that, atheist? Forgot his name, always forget. That is, this is the one who denies.
Richard Dawkins or
Dawkins,
Alex
yes.
O'Connor.
I'll remember the name.
Sam
Yes,
Harris,
that's it.
maybe.
Sam Harris, exactly. Sam Harris, yes. Okay. So these people who seem to capture, and also Lex Friedman, now that he has been able to invite presidents to his interview, people think highly of this show when they come. Let's maybe take it in the order that seems most natural. What do you think of Ben Shapiro in general, his position? Because since we started talking about him.
So all of these figures I've seen bits and pieces of. I don't follow them very closely. I don't watch a ton of their content,
Yeah.
but I have at least a small sampling of them. So, and I might say this about many of them, but I would say they're mixed. I think Ben Shapiro has some very good things to say. I think he has been influenced by Ayn Rand, and I think that comes through and at times, many times, in his advocacy of free market policies, capitalism, his defense of Israel. However, there's also another side which I strongly disagree with, which is his religious side, which I've already mentioned. But also not just his religious side. He's become more pro-Trump. I think he used to, back when Trump was first elected, he was, I don't know if he was a never Trumper, as many people call themselves.
Yeah.
But I think he was at least not as pro-Trump as he is now. I think he's become more pro-Trump, maybe because he thinks he can build a larger audience that way, which might be true. But I don't think that's the most fundamental consideration one should use as to what one's view should be on a politician.
Can you explain this phenomenon actually that we are observing? Many intellectuals, or not even intellectuals, people with a name and people who seem to have an independent opinion, basically, or going in openly supporting Trump, like Dr. Phil, for example. While Dr. Phil is excellent, for example, on Israel, there was a debate on his channel where he defended the right to Israel to defend itself. Seems like a reasonable guy, but he has not challenged anything that Trump said. He appeared with him, he supported him, and we see this widely, that people stop criticizing him because, well, now that he is a president-elect, that's it, game over. We should no longer criticize Trump. We should just support Trump since he's the president. Is that the idea? I think
some people might they don't have any firm principles, and depending on who's in power, they they could change their view. Excuse me. I don't know about Dr. Phil. I don't follow him, but I think some people have seen Trump just as they're opportunist. So it's not. It might not be that they particularly agree with Trump, but they just think they can become more famous and powerful if they bow down, kiss the ring of the person who is currently in power. This might also happen with corporations who make donations to different parties, depending on who's currently in office. Unfortunately, I think politicians, they have control over the economy to an extent they should not have. There
Yeah.
are lots of regulations, and businessmen, they lobby the government to get the politicians on their side. So they'll make donations or,
Yeah.
take them out to parties because, unfortunately, I wouldn't put the blame on this primarily on the corporations who do the lobbying. If you think lobbying is the only way you can run your business, because of the way our system has been evolving, and then there could be joint blame on both sides, the corporations and the politicians. But I think we need to get governments and
Yeah.
out of the economy so that there's not an incentive for people to try to lobby politicians and bribe them to get special favors from the government, like from through antitrust. Sometimes we see large corporations suing other large corporations and appealing
Yeah.
to like antitrust laws, which allegedly are supposed to stimulate competition. But I think, in fact, these are non-objective laws. There's really no clear way to abide by them. It just gives the government arbitrary power to regulate lots of
Yeah.
corporations.
Actually, a thinker that I forgot to mention is Elon Musk. Elon Musk. I never thought of him originally as an idea person. I thought of him as a businessman, as a productive man. But as years progressed, we see the world where Musk is expressing opinions. He has views. And do you think Musk is expressing views that are beneficial on net or detrimental?
Again, I think he's a mixed case on net. I'm not sure whether I would say his ideas are positive or negative. I think maybe it's more important just to call it out, however it goes in particular cases. So
Yeah.
some of his tweets, I think I would strongly agree with. Others I would strongly disagree with. He's
Mhm.
become favorable to Trump, uh,
Yeah.
having joined his team, and he's but he's also, and I would be opposed to that. I'm quite anti-Trump myself, which is not to say I would say you should never vote for Trump. I personally have not voted for Trump, but I can understand people who might think he's better on a particular issue, like Israel, for instance. You might think he's better than Kamala Harris would have been, and if
Yeah.
Israel's a big issue for you, you might have voted for Trump on those grounds. But I think
Yeah.
just voting for him is different than being an enthusiastic supporter of him.
Exactly.
That's what I
Yeah.
disagree with, and I think Elon Musk is probably more in that. Um, I worry he's more in that enthusiastic camp, not just seeing
Yeah.
him as the lesser of evils. So, but on the other hand, I think he's run these companies like SpaceX, which has done some amazing things. There was this uh, catch of the rocket a few
Yeah.
months or weeks
Yeah.
ago, which is very impressive, and he wants to take us to Mars. So I admire his ambition and a lot of the technological innovations he's helped to run the companies of. So I think he's a very mixed case, and it's important just to call it out either way, not be a tribalist and think everything he does is good or everything he does is bad,
Yeah.
but judge him on a case by case basis and call out what's good and also call
Well,
out
let's
what's bad.
let's call out one thing that I think is terrible. Is he's suing advertisers on Twitter who refuse to advertise, put their ad content near posts about racism or anti-Semitism. They created a coalition. The advertisers created a coalition that we will collectively agree not to advertise on Twitter because the Twitter policy was not to filter anything. And what happened is that all these anti-Semitic posts showed up beside their advertisements. So he decided to sue them for colluding against him and using antitrust, and I think that's terrible.
Yeah, I would agree. I think people should be free to associate with whomever they want. And if you think Twitter is a bad platform because of who they allow or the kinds of comments they allow, then you should be free to disassociate from them. And that's not any violation of anyone's rights if you choose to dissociate. It would be a violation of rights if you were forced to associate with someone,
Yeah.
regardless of your opinion of them. So, yeah, I would strongly disagree with Musk on that one.
All right. Well, let's move on to some other intellectual. Maybe we'll cover Jordan Peterson. Do you think Jordan Peterson still has any kind of serious influence, or is he passé now?
So he's another one that I don't follow closely. He certainly had a large influence, it seems. I guess particularly on young men, it seems like he's given them some kind of direction and meaning. He first came to prominence back, I think, around 2016. There was this controversy about using pronouns enforced by, I don't know if it was the Canadian government or university that he was working at. You had to use certain pronouns to refer to people who were transgender, and he refused to do this.
Yeah.
And I admire taking a stand against that, where you're coerced. I mean, if it's a private university, they can set whatever policies they want. I think they should be able to do that. But if it's a government institution, I think it's not so clear that it's right for them to be coercing people to do certain things. So I admire Peterson for that sort of fight that he put up against and enforced use of certain language. But I disagree with his. Again, he seems kind of religious, although it's maybe not the most conventional, straightforward kind of religiosity he has. It might be a kind of metaphorical. It's hard to get a handle on him. Sometimes when someone asks him a simple question, like, "Do you believe in God?" I've heard that he will ramble a lot and just talk in these kind of word salads, and it's hard to make sense of what he's saying.
Yeah.
So he's another mixed figure who I think has been very influential. As to how influential he is right now, I don't have a great read on that. But I think he's just a mixed case.
I see. Well, let's now maybe touch on some of the policies that briefly we did just talk about it, but the what's in vogue is Trump's idea of tariffs. He said, my favorite word in the English language is tariffs. He is now trying to impose tariffs on Canada, on Mexico, and he is saying this to other countries, that I'm going to create tariffs. And he also says, in respect to Canada, that by not setting tariffs, United States is sponsoring Canada because there is a trade deficit. We export more than they import into Canada. I mean, United States. Because I don't know if some listeners don't know, but this show is based out of Canada, from Vancouver, Canada. Radio Vera is based in Vancouver, Canada. All right, so can you maybe briefly state your view of tariffs for the sake of our listeners?
I oppose tariffs, and the reason I oppose tariffs is because they are coercive. So this is a case where, by force of governments, you are making companies charge or you're adding a price to whatever goods they want to import. And it's not that some overseas country, Japan or whomever, they want to sell to, let's say, Americans at a certain rate. The government is forcing them. So if they want to sell a car to an American for $20,000, the government is saying, we're forcing you to sell this at $25,000. It's not their free judgment.
So who is going to pay the surplus? Who is actually going to pay the final surplus?
Yeah. So if you're an American, if you're an American who is considering buying this Japanese car, now you have to pay $25,000 instead of the $20,000 that they were going to sell it to you.
So let's repeat this for everybody. What Trump is saying when he advocating for tariffs is that, the people in Japan or China or whatever, when they sell you a car in the United States, they will have to pay a penalty of $5,000. What was actually going to happen that you, the buyer in the United States of the car, will pay $5,000 more for that same car. The penalty is on you, Mr. Buyer. You will be paying more, right?
Yeah.
He is
The
not
Japanese
penalizing
company,
Japan or Chinese manufacturer. You're not penalizing because they're just going to raise the price to cover those tariffs. The reason is just the reason they price the car what it is. That's how they make profit. If you're going to make it more expensive for them, they will raise the price to continue making the same profit, which means that you will buy it more expensively in the United States. Now, I think what does Trump hope? That someone will produce the same kind of car within the United States, and now it will cost, if it's made in the USA, $20,000. You think it's likely to happen?
it depends on, what is the market like in the US. So US manufacturers of cars, they might see an opportunity. And now that Japan is being penalized, we can get away with raising the prices of our own cars up to the threshold, but not exceeding.
Yeah.
But then that's now going to make things more expensive for the Americans who are buying from American car manufacturers. So Americans are still being penalized.
Hold on. Why would it be more expensive for Americans if they buy from American manufacturer? I did not follow that point. Can you repeat, please?
So if Japan raises they have to sell at $25,000 instead of 20,000. Now maybe a American car manufacturer who let's say they had previously sold cars at 15,000, they now know they can raise their prices to 20,000 because they're not going to face the competition from the Japanese.
Yeah, exactly.
So now they can raise their prices, not because they were forced to by market forces, but just because arbitrarily these tariffs were set, and now American car buyers have to pay more.
The American buyer will have to pay more for a worse car.
Yeah, or at least a car that's was previously valued by the market at 15,000. Now it's arbitrarily valued at.
But usually cars are valued by the market for a reason. If a car that costs 15,000 is like that because it's worse by some parameters than the car that goes for 30,000. It's just different kind of cars.
Yeah.
All right.
And the government shouldn't be bailing out companies if they fail, not just producing inferior cars, but their ability to stay in the industry at all and produce any cars. Back in, I think it might be the 70s or 80s, I think Chrysler was bailed out by the governments. And this is forcing taxpayers to subsidize the production of cars they don't want, as judged by market forces.
Right, because again, the rhetoric is here. We have to produce everything within our own country. We have to be completely self-sufficient. We don't need anybody else. And even if someone else makes it cheaper and more effectively, no, we will make it in our country and we will beat them on every level, on effectiveness, on quality. I mean, what's wrong with that philosophy?
There's no need to produce everything yourself. That's defeating the purpose of division of labor. I mean, if you look at it on like an individual level, why not be a self-sustaining farmer? Why not produce all your own food, your own vegetables, your own meat?
Yeah.
Why not build your own furniture? Why not produce your own car?
Yeah.
Because it's very inefficient. And this applies not just on a local level, but on a global level. So it could be that some countries, because of their resources, they're much more productive at producing some goods rather than the others. But we lose all that comparative advantage. We lose the advantage of the division of labor when we try to do everything ourselves.
But does this argument work? The analogy of a farmer, does it actually scale to the country? Can we say, well, the United States is a big country. We can produce everything. We can have our own factories that make cars. We can have our own farms that make all the wheat. We don't need to import anything. Maybe we can export, but we can just produce everything ourselves. Maybe for United States, could you argue that it could actually work in the United States? Maybe it doesn't work in Israel. It's a smaller country. It does need to import something because it just doesn't have all those resources. It doesn't have as much wood, for example. It does have to import wood. I understand it doesn't have steel. It does have to import steel. But, well, first of all, let me give you a moment to answer this. Do you think there is a case for America to produce everything by itself?
It's more plausible that you would produce everything yourself as a country than you would as an individual.
Yeah,
But I still think it's the case that even if you could produce everything yourself, you couldn't do it as efficiently as if you outsourced certain of your goods that you produce. So even if we can, uh, say, produce cars here in America, um, it might be better a better allocation of capital to focus on the computer industry. Maybe we have unique talents in that industry that don't exist in other places, and so it's better to there's a greater profits to be
yeah.
had if we funnel our capital into one industry rather than the other, even if we could do it all
I
ourselves.
find it very interesting that very few places in the world can match the ingenuity that's happening in the United States in the IT industry. I don't know why that happens. Does it have to do with the American spirit that people try to invent things here and they don't really do that in other places? I mean, we do see a rise in high tech sectors in India, in Ukraine, but I think only Israel can really compete with United States in innovation. Might be wrong here, but that's my understanding. Why is it that America is so innovative?
I think fundamentally it's because this is because of the freedoms we have. So we don't have, at least the initial idea of America was that we didn't have a all-powerful government regulating the behavior of its citizens. You were free to do what you want, act as you chose, as long as you're not initiating force against others. And this philosophy of government attracted millions of immigrants from around the world who did
Yeah,
live under oppressive regimes. They saw America as this land of liberty, symbolized by the Statue of Liberty. They saw that you could come over here and make a better life for yourselves. You would not be persecuted or oppressed by the government. So you can live as you choose. And this is a very attractive model of society, which is conducive to entrepreneurship, and I think that freedom is what allows the innovation to happen. If you have to run to the government and get the permission of the commissar in Soviet Russia, you have to make it sure it fits into their 5-year plan. Then that's going to massively slow everything down. There's going to be huge bureaucratic hurdles you have to jump over to
yeah.
make any little minor improvement, and
Mm.
that's not conducive to innovation. That's conducive to stagnation.
I can also maybe add something that I have observed is that in the third world countries, countries that don't have pure freedom, many people who do enter high tech fields, I think their goal is just have a decent life, just make enough money to afford things, to have quality of life, and maybe if they have enough to emigrate from that place, from that country. But when people come to United States, those same people, they come to United States, suddenly they have a spirit of innovation. They don't just make enough money to afford the living, to afford groceries, but it's not enough for them. They have creative ideas to go beyond that. Uh, and interesting, like for example, Zoom. Zoom was invented by, I think, immigrant from South Korea. I'm not sure, or China. I'm not sure, but Zoom was created here. It wasn't created where that guy came from. And you can say many things like this. Even Google. Google was created by son of Russian immigrants. It was created here, not there. So we can find these parallels in many sub industries within the IT. It's people come to the United States and suddenly they discover that they can create new things.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think with the Zoom CEO, unfortunately, it was very hard for him to immigrate. I heard he had to wait, I don't know how many years, and file a number of different applications before he was actually approved. So I think we could have a lot more innovation if we had a more open immigration system. A lot of people who want to come here are ambitious people, people who have big dreams, and unfortunately, I think a lot of those people are kept out by our current immigration policies, which are far too restrictive, in my view.
Would you say the common idea, since we're talking about the ideas prevalent in the United States today and in the West, the idea prevalent today is that we need to close up the borders. The border is a big problem. It's a big problem, especially in the United States. They're saying the south border, you have all these people coming in through this open border. And these are not just, I guess, Mexicans or South Americans. People come through that gate from all over the world because they can get through. And the whole campaign that Trump had was on fixing the border situation. And the main criticism of Kamala Harris was that she let the border wide open. She mismanaged the border. And the greatest evil in the world are the immigrants or the migrants or the illegal immigrants. Um, what can you say about this topic?
I think there's a lot of misinformation about immigration. Like when it's called an invasion, this rhetoric is often used by Trump that these immigrants are invading. I'd say no. If you want to see a real invasion, look at something like the Hamas attack on October 7th, where they come across
Yeah,
and they murder hundreds of people. That's an invasion. So I
yeah,
think it's a smear term which is used to rile people up, get them afraid, and maybe scapegoat would be a term to apply here. I think America definitely has problems, but I would not put the blame of these problems on the immigrants, who I think are largely peaceful. Certainly, there are some criminals, but there are some criminals in America already. I think most of the people who are coming here are just people who are trying to live a better life for themselves. They're coming from some third world country where they could be stuck in poverty for decades or their entire life if they don't get out, and their only way to immigrate is illegally. A lot of the rhetoric around this topic is we're not against immigration at all. It's just the illegal immigration. But if you make it so hard that it's impossible or nearly
yeah,
impossible for millions
yeah.
of people to immigrate, then it's understandable that people would not try to do it the legal way. It's just too hard. So they come here illegally. It should be like over 100 years ago. All you had to do pretty much is jump on a boat, pay your ticket, and then they
Yeah.
might inspect you at Ellis Island to make sure you don't have some contagious disease. And if you don't,
Yeah.
you're in. Um,
Well, another argument they say that well, these people are just coming here to mooch. If you would not give them welfare or something, or in any kind of form, it's not called welfare. It's called just like money that they receive. They get free hotel. They stay in a hotel. It's all sponsored for them. Uh, no, people say, well, why would they wouldn't even come?
Well, they shouldn't. So I don't think they should get welfare. So mooching off of the government is not a good thing. We shouldn't be forced through taxes to support them. But I think that applies to anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're an
Yeah,
immigrant or an American. You shouldn't be able to mooch off of welfare. But another problem is these people aren't allowed to work often. Um, it's very hard to come here and legally be allowed to work. So what I think we should do is not give them welfare, but do allow them to work, and then they can be self-supporting. They don't need to be
yeah.
parasites on other people. Who They can earn an honest living for themselves, and I think that's what most of them probably want to do.
You think that the United States can support this kind of inflow of people if they had the work permits and they could actually work? I think the situation now that most of them actually stay close to the southern border, they don't spread out within the United States. Is that the case? Or not much, not significantly? Or is that wrong information? I may not have the most updated information here.
I don't know if most of them stay close to the border. There are some who go back and forth, or
Mm.
for some, I think it's a seasonal thing with agriculture. They'll come here for
Yeah,
a while and then temporarily, and then they'll go back. Um, it might also turn partly on like what is the nature. Are there these sanctuary cities where you're more safe to stay if you're in
yeah,
you're not going to be
yeah.
deported. Like Los Angeles, I think is one of these sanctuary cities, or San Francisco. So, but I don't know like right now if most of them are staying near the border. But I'm hopeful that they will be free to go wherever they want, and they're not going to be deported. But that's going to take a lot of work to persuade the public at large that that should be the case. That's part of what I do.
Great. One more question on this topic of immigration is that there are some people saying that there are these immigrants are coming in, they're sponsored by the left, by the Democrats, so that they can gain votes. So they want to increase the voting base. Can these immigrants actually vote? Or migrants, not immigrants, illegal migrants, can they vote?
I don't think they can. I think you need to be a citizen, and you're not a citizen if you just migrate here. Certainly not if you migrate here illegally.
Yeah.
So I don't think they could vote. Now, of course, it might be the case that certain places don't verify your identification
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
go into like a voting booth. And I don't know if there are some places where you can vote without showing ID. Maybe there are, but at least as a matter of law, I would think that they're not able to vote if they're here illegally. They would have to first become citizens.
Do you think that the voting mechanism should be improved? That is not good.
I think there probably should be a way to make it electronic rather than having to either do mail-in votes or actually go physically to a polling place. It seems like we should be advanced enough today that you can just do it electronically, and then it's also much easier to count that way.
Yeah.
And of course, there are worries about fraud. But I think that's true regardless of whether you're doing it electronically or by paper. And there ought to be ways that you can put in safeguards so that if you do it electronically, you don't have massive numbers or maybe any. Maybe it's even easier to prevent fraud if you use technology, maybe AI of some sort. I don't know. But I do think it could be improved. And then maybe you'd be less likely to have these claims of stolen elections. If it were made electronic, it might be easier.
Okay, great. Well, we try to keep our show around an hour. In the finishing minutes, we've been slightly over an hour now. But in the finishing minutes, I would like to give you the stage. You can talk openly about what is the objectivist philosophy, why you advocate it, where people can find out more about it, and so on. Go ahead.
Thanks. Well, thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. So to let the audience know a bit more about the objectivist philosophy I support. So I think Boris might have mentioned this in the intro, but to put it in a nutshell, it's a philosophy of reason, egoism, and capitalism. So reason meaning using your own minds as opposed to just going by faith, just believing something without evidence. And then egoism, that means living for yourself, but not by being a rude jerk and stepping on the rights of others. Your purpose in life is to pursue your own happiness. You have one life to live on this view. I don't believe in a afterlife or some supernatural realm you go after you die. You only have one shot at this. So make it the best you can be. Achieve the most happiness that you can. And then politically, capitalism. This is the most conducive society to achieving your own self-interest in my view, in Rand's view. This is a society, capitalism, where the fundamental principle is that you cannot coerce others. So you have to relate to others on a voluntary basis, on a trading basis. So if you want something from someone else, you offer them something in exchange. Could be money. You go into a store, you give them money, they give you food or shoes or whatever it is, but you don't just steal it. That would be coercion. And you also don't use the legislature of the government to vote. So taxes are a way of, you might vote in politicians who say, we're going to tax everyone and then redistribute the money people have. So we're going to use taxes to fund healthcare or education, public schools. Ayn Rand is opposed to that. She thinks you should be free to spend your money as you choose. It's yours. It's your life, and you should be able to take the fruits of your efforts, the money you earn on a job, and spend it however you choose. It shouldn't be up to a government to redistribute your wealth as it chooses. So you shouldn't be funding other people's retirement,
Yeah.
social security. If you want to help someone voluntarily, that's fine, but you shouldn't be forced to.
Where,
So that's a little bit about her philosophy. And I see you want to
yeah,
jump in and say
I
something.
want
So.
to just direct slightly. Where can people read about this or watch videos about this that you would recommend? What would be a good starting point? Go ahead.
So Ayn Rand has many books. She did fiction and nonfiction. Her best known fiction books are The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. She also wrote a much smaller one called Anthem. That might be a good one to start with. And We the Living, which was set in Soviet Russia. So for your Russian audience, they might be interested to read that one in particular. There's tons you can find on the internet. But of course, there's also misinformation. I think she's often smeared because she has very controversial views, and a lot of people see her as a threat, I think, and they distort her views rather than arguing with what she actually advocated. So I think it's very important to read her own works. You can find a lot of that on the Ayn Rand Institute's websites. And I've also got some videos on my channel where I discuss issues from a perspective of Rand's philosophy. Excuse me. Dan Norton one on YouTube, if you want to check that out. If you even want to have a conversation with me, feel free to get in touch. So those are some places that you can look for more about these ideas.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for finding time to speak with me today. I know that everyone who is listening, I gave Dan a short notice because, as you know, that on this channel we usually do guest appearances in Russian. And when I cannot find a Russian speaker who can speak about Western ideas, I invite English speakers. And I think very highly of Dan, of his activity in on the media, in communicating the ideas of objectivism. So I'm very glad that Dan actually was able to join us. So with so little notice, thank you very much, Dan. I encourage everybody to go and check out Dan's YouTube channel. He has some really interesting videos when he approaches students on the streets of universities. He asks them provocative questions. He has videos where he calls big YouTube shows with hundreds of thousands of viewers, and he asks questions, challenges everybody there. He holds his own very well. So thank you very much, Dan, and to all our viewers. We'll see you next time. Remember that our Radio Vera show comes up every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Vancouver time, which is Pacific time, and we will be again next week, and we will be talking to Gregory Magarchuk, which already appeared with us a few times, but now it will be his whole hour. So thank you very much, and until next week. Thank you, Dan.